what do you mean by base class? The base class is the existing class, can also be called as base class or super class. While writing the son properties, this son have the properties of grandfather, father and their additional properties. That's why here once again no need to write the properties of grandfather as well as father. That's why what happens, the memory consumption is reduces here. If I'm going to take only char name, then only one character it will take. Inside the bracket, if I'm going to write, then for name maximum 10 characters it will take. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-Institute College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today, we want to start with the first session of Inheritance chapter. In the annual exam, from this chapter, you will get only one question, that is on part D for 5 marks. Only one question you are going to get. That is what is inheritance, then the advantages, like that you are going to get only one question or types of inheritance. Whereas on today's class, you will come to know regarding introduction to inheritance, that is what do you mean by inheritance, then what are the advantages of inheritance, then how to write the syntax. With that, you will come to know regarding one example program, because you may want to get the question, what is inheritance, write the advantages with syntax, or what is inheritance, explain with an example program. Whereas inheritance is a process of acquiring the properties from base class to derived class. Or I can say it's a process of creating a new class by using existing class. For example, consider we have the base class father. The same properties of father is passed to son. That means it's a process of this son take the properties, behavior from the base class father. That means here we have base class, then here we have derived class. Whereas inheritance is a process of acquiring the properties from base class to derived class. It means that son acquires or take the properties from father to son. It means that here once again this son contains the properties of father. Once again no need to write the same properties here. For example, father having some properties like the father can be able to write neat diagram, handwriting is good. Like that, if you have the father has some properties, while writing the son properties, this son have the properties of father. Only one line we have to mention. No need to write all the properties once again. That means here is a process of acquiring, or we can say it as taking the properties from base class to derived class. That is, inheritance is the capability of one class to inherit the properties from another class. Is a process of or capability of acquiring the properties from one class to another class. Here the base class can be called as parent class. The base class can also be called as parent class or super class also. Inheritance is a process of creating a new class by using existing class. This base class can also be called as existing class, and derived class can be called as child class. Here it is a process of creating. It is a process of creating a new class. That is, new class here is nothing but child class or derived class by using existing class. Whereas inheritance is a process of acquiring the properties from base class to derived class. That is nothing but inheritance. Then when you come on inheritance, then what do you mean by base class? The base class is the existing class, can also be called as base class or super class. Already I told you, in the base class has some properties, and derived class also having some additional properties, including the base class properties. Whereas the base class is the existing class. The base class from which the properties are inherited is called the base class, or we can call it as super class also, existing class or super class or parent class. Here what happens? This have the capability to transfer their properties to derived class. The derived class, the class that inherits the properties from the base class, is called derived class, or we can call it as subclass also. This derived class has the capability to acquire, take the properties from base class. That is, it inherits the properties from base class. This derived class can also be called as child class, or we call it as subclass also, or new class also we can say here. That is derived class. First, if I want to create a derived class, first I have to create the base class. First, the base class is defined and then derived class is defined, specifying its relationship with the base class. What is the relationship with the base class? By defining that, I can able to create a new class or derived class here. The main thing, inheritance is a process of just taking the properties. From that, we have some advantages. One by one we will discuss. For example, when they come on advantages, the first advantage is reusing existing code. Already I told you, this father having some behavior properties and son also having some properties. Whereas here, for father we have written some code. While writing the code for son, in only one line I have to write, this son have the properties of father. Then once again, no need to write all the properties of father. That means code can be reused here. Reusing of existing code is possible here. And here, faster development time. Time consumption is reduces here. Already I told you father having some properties. While writing son properties, no need to write the same code once again. Only in one line I have to mention that this son has the properties of father. Then obviously time consumption is reduces because no need to write the code once again. That's why time consumption is reduces. And here memory consumption also reduces here because only for father we used to write the code. While writing the code for son, we are not writing once again the entire code from the beginning till the end. That's why memory consumption also reduces here. That is easy to maintain the code also. Easily we can able to maintain the code. Here, while transferring the properties from base class to derived class, if I want, I can able to pass the properties from higher level to lower level or from lower level to higher level like that. Here, grandfather. From grandfather we can able to pass the properties to father. From father once again we can have pass the properties to son. That means this son have the properties of grandfather as well as father, with that additional properties also it having. It means that here easy to maintain as well as easy to extend also. At higher level, I can able to extend here. Easy to maintain the code, easy to extend the code also. Memory utilization is less here. Memory utilization is less here because while writing the son properties, this son have the properties of grandfather, father and then additional properties. That's why here once again no need to write the properties of grandfather as well as father. That's why what happens, the memory consumption is reduces here. Code can be reused, memory consumption is very less, easy to maintain, easy to extend and time consumption is also very less here. These are the few advantages of inheritance. Whereas inheritance is nothing but it is a process of acquiring the properties from base class to derived class. Whereas when they come on advantages, easy to maintain, easy to extend, memory consumption is less, time consumption is less, then memory can utilize it properly here. Then next when they come on syntax, first you have to write the class, then derived class name you have to write. With a new class we are creating. Then colon, next we have to write the visibility mode. Visibility mode, then later on you have to write the base class. See, first as usual, first create the base class. First create the base class. To create the derived class, then derived class name, whatever name you want for derived class. For derived class, write on the mention the name, then you have to mention the colon. This colon tell you whether how we can able to access. Then next visibility mode. For example, public I am going to write. Then finally base class we will write. From this, if I am going to write public, the properties of base class can be transferred to derived class here. If I am going to write private, then the properties of base class is not going to transfer to derived class. That means which type of visibility mode here we are used. By that we can identify which are the values is passing and how here it is passing. Then which access specifier it will convert, regarding that we can able to tell. That means first you have to write the class name, then class, then derived class, then colon, visibility mode, and then the base class. For example, I want to create a class son. Before writing son, I have to write first the father class. First class, here father. Then for father, we want to write the statement, functions, everything. It means that I created one base class. Now I want to create one more class called as son. Then next I have to write class. The derived class name son I am to take. Then colon. After writing this colon, visibility mode I am to write public. Then base class here we will write. While writing the base class is father. Then here we will open the class, especially son class. Then here we have to close. It means that the properties of father can be transferred to son here. Within one line I mentioned that this son have the properties of father. Then once again, no need to write all the properties of father once again here. Within one line I can able to write. From that, time consumption is reduces, memory consumption is reduces, easy to maintain, easy to debug, as well as code can be reused here. This is the general syntax. Here inside the bracket you have to write the member function, especially which are the member function under derived class. That function you have to mention. Then after that you have to close this class. That means here we have opened the class and then here we are closing. This is the general syntax to represent inheritance. Because in inheritance, you may going to get the question, what is inheritance? Write the advantage of inheritance with a syntax for 5 marks. Otherwise, what is inheritance? Explain with an example program. Like that, you may going to get the question. Then now you come to know the definition. Then advantages. Under definition, what do you mean by base class, derived class, how exactly it will transfer. Then advantages. Then already you come to know the syntax. Next, we'll explain this with one example program. For example, here we are creating one class. The class name here we are given as father. Before creating the class, we are writing the # include iostream.header file. This is a supporting header file for cin as well as cout function. Then here if you observe, I am creating one class called it as father. In this father, especially on this father class, we are writing the data members as well as member functions. In this class, we open the bracket. Then in private section, we are declaring char name 10. If I am going to take only char name, then only one character it will take. Inside the bracket, if I am going to write, then for name, maximum 10 characters it will take. This is the data members, especially for father class. Then in public function, I am taking only one function, that is void get data function. I am not doing any calculation, only thing I just want to enter the name, that I want to input that, then later on I want to just display that. Then here void get data is the member function of father class. Then here in this function, especially cout, enter the name we are given, then later on we will input that name. Then here we have opened getData function and here we have closed that getData function. Then afterwards we are closing the father class. Whereas in this father class we have data members, name as well as member function, getData is the member function. Next, one more class we are creating, son. Here we have closed the class, here we have closed the function. And here class son, then colon, the visibility mode we are given as public. If I am going to write private, then we are not able to access any data as well as functions of base class to derived class. Here the visibility mode we are given as public. It means that the properties of father can be transferred to son here. If I am going to write the visibility mode public. Here don't use scope resolution operator, whereas scope resolution operator is used to define the member function outside the class, as well as this scope resolution operator tell you that particular function belongs to which class. Whereas here we have to use only colon, not scope resolution operator. Whereas if you write colon, then it will tell you this father properties can be transferred to sun here. If I'm going to write the visibility mode public here. Then now we are opening the class, especially for sun. Here in public section, I am just taking only one function, that is void display. Under display function, name equals, I am just displaying the value. That means whatever name in get data I have entered, that here I can able to display. Then afterwards, we are closing this function. Then later on, we are closing the class. It means that in this program, how many classes are there? If you observe, two classes are there. One is father class and one more is son class. Whereas father class can be called as here base class and son class can be called as derived class. Father class can be called as base class and son class can be called as derived class. In public access specifier with visibility mode public, if I am going to give, then the properties of father can be transferred to son. It means that this son have this data as well as functions here. Whatever functions here we have, that functions can be accessed by this son class. Then here we open the class, especially son class, then here we are closed. It means that in this program, we have two member function. One is get data member function belongs to father class and void display function belongs to son class. Now is it clear? Then if you observe in the main program, I am creating an object for son, not for father. If I am going to create an object for father, then only this data and function we can able to access. But if I am going to create an object for son, then I can able to access father properties as well as son properties. Both the properties here we can able to access. Here, for example, get data function also I can able to access as well as display function also I can able to access. If I am going to use only father class to create the object, for example, like this void main, here void main, then here I am going to creating the object that is father, then object. Then with the help of this object, I can able to access only get data function, but I am not able to access display function. If I am going to create an object for father, that's why here we are creating object for a son. In the son, if I am going to create the object, then properties of base class as well as properties of derived class, both I can able to access. That's why here while creating object, compulsory for derived class only you have to create the object. Then object dot get data, then it will display that enter the name. In the output screen, you will get enter name. Then you will input, for example, I am going to input Anu. This is the input value. Then object dot display function, then it will come here. Then in the display function, then it will display name equals Anu. This is your output screen. It means that I can able to access get data function of father as well as display function of son class. It means that if I am going to create object for a derived class, both the thing I can able to access. This is one example program to represent inheritance. Then on today's class, you came to know regarding what do you mean by inheritance? Under that, what do you mean by base class, derived class? If I want to create a derived class, first I have to create the base class. Then what are the advantages? That is reusing existing code, fast development time, easy to maintain, easy to extend, memory consumption can be utilized properly. Then when they come on syntax, class, then derived class name, colon, visibility mode, then later on the base class you have to mention. Then with that you came to know regarding one example program. Whereas in the next class, you will come to know regarding which are the different types of inheritance, like single level inheritance, multi-level inheritance, multiple inheritance, hierarchical inheritance, hybrid inheritance, how exactly these types will work. Then what do you mean by visibility mode? Whereas in this program you have studied just colon after colon you write visibility mode. Whereas what do you mean by visibility mode? Then in the visibility mode, if I am going to write private, what happens? If I am going to write public, then what happens? In the visibility mode, if I am going to write protected, then what are the data we can able to access here? Regarding that, you will come to know in the next session. Thank you for all of you.